Okay, 5, 4, 3, and we're live. I'm ripping off Joe Rogan. Hello everyone, this is Dwight Woods, Jeet Kune Rebel. Welcome to the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast number 38. And this is the one about, it's actually an online question that I got. Why isn't Jeet Kune used more in MMA? So, as I've told you before, I have different sources of inspiration, let's call it, for the topics that we address on the broadcast. So this one came from an online question, and any of you who read my Facebook post on my personal page, the Dwight D. Woods page, then you would have received an advance warning because I did post an answer to the question over there. But what we're going to talk about today, it takes a little bit of a different approach from what it was that I answered online. Okay, so here goes. One thing I will ask you to keep in mind as we have this short discussion here is I think it's the quote is attributed to Eleanor Roosevelt, and it says something like, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, but small minds discuss people. And I tell you this simply because it's very popular in today's political and therefore cultural environment to see people spending a whole heap of time doing like a verbal takedown of other people, right? Especially amongst the pundits and the commentators and what have you, right? And like we've talked about before, culture and politics kind of go hand in hand. The Jeet Kune culture and the Jeet Kune politics go hand in hand. And so sometimes you will come across people trying to do takedowns of other people, right? Last week we talked about how Jeet Kune, with its emphasis on looking at different things from different parts of the world, and it being the life study of varied people from all over the world, that in Jeet Kune we take a definitive stance against the bigotry of small-mindedness, or the small-mindedness of bigotry, right? You can have it both ways, all right? So when I talk today, I am not criticizing anyone in particular. What I'm doing is critiquing their ideas about the art and the philosophy of Jeet Kune, right? So that's kind of where you have to start your understanding, right? That this thing, I show you Sifu Dan's book all the time. I love the title, The Art and Philosophy of Jeet Kune. I got a little bit of a compliment from my senior, Chris Kent, my JKD senior, Chris Kent, a while ago, where he told me he was glad that I expressed sometimes that Jeet Kune is both an art and a science. Right, so that's all part of what we'll talk about a little bit here. Both in art and philosophy, so that is on the physical plane, on the physical level, there is a way of doing things, and then mentally or even intellectually, there is a way of looking at things, and that's part and parcel of the Jeet Kune approach. So the question is, why isn't Jeet Kune used more in MMA? So one person's answer, so I'll kind of take his answer in parts, right? Was that Jeet Kune is not popular in MMA. Listen to this, because it's a mixed bag of stuff you learn from other arts, plus the fact that it incorporates a lot of dirty techniques, right? So I say, hold up. Jeet Kune is a mixed bag of stuff you learn from other arts. That's like saying, right, that in Jeet Kune, we take a certain amount of techniques from one art, right, and then another few techniques from another art, and then some more from this third art, and then we put them all together and we come up with this new art that we call Jeet Kune. So I don't know how many times that we've said this, but it's been over 40 years, and there's still this kind of misconception, so I guess we'll have to say it forever, right? Jeet Kune, part of Jeet Kune is about finding the connecting thread between arts, let's say, and seeing how they can go together while applying, retaining, maintaining even certain structural elements, and then using certain guidelines to develop your strategies and your techniques. That's why it is an art, a philosophy, and a science. And that's also why I suspect it's not for everybody out there, if you get what I'm saying, right? Okay, so here he continues to break it down, right? He says the lead-in straight punch, right? An element of Jeet Kune Do. The lead-in straight punch, it's naive relying on this move to knock out anyone. A lead hook would probably do the job more consistently, right? I was like, okay, all right. So obviously, this guy has never come across the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, right? Because on, let's see, page 89, the leading straight punch, right? This is what it said. No one punch, not even the efficient straight lead, can be an end in itself. The straight lead is used as a means to an end and definitely should be reinforced and supported by other angles, punches, and kicks, right? Then on page 90, overleaf, it says, sometimes it pays to use double leads because they are unexpected and the second punch tends to disturb the opponent's rhythm and thus paves the way for a follow-up. So to say that, you know, it's naive to rely on the lead-in straight punch to knock anyone out, it shows a misunderstanding of what the straight punch is supposed to do, right? Then he says about interception. This is a good one. He says, if Bruce Lee had more time, right, he would realize this only works if you're fighting someone slower, right? However, and then I don't get what this one means. However, it should be noted that cross kicks, like the one John Jones uses, is effective if you have the range. So I'm not sure what John Jones's oblique kick has to do with interception. Anyhow, he says it's frowned upon for the damage it could do to the other guy's knee and canary. So whatever, right? So interception, right? So I took the time to break this down, right? So this response will take a little bit. So guys, just hang tough with me. So page 56 of the Tao is the section. Yeah. Okay, page 56 of the Tao is where we start talking about speed, right? 5 types of speed. Perceptual speed, the ability to quickly see an opening. Mental speed, quickness of mind to select the right move. Initiation speed, economy of motion in launching your attack. Performance speed, the actual quickness of the movement. And alteration speed, the ability to change direction midstream. So starting on page 56 in the chapter on qualities, right? Bruce Lee starts to take you on this little journey, right? So the journey starts with speed, 5 types, and then it continues through timing. So yes, Sifu Nick, it continues through timing. Reaction time, which is the gap between stimulus and response. And then movement time, which is the time taken to perform one simple movement. Then the journey continues on into broken rhythm, right? And the definition is kind of, when the rhythm is broken, speed is no longer the primary element in the success of the attack or the counterattack, right? And then there's a little section on the 1 1/2 beat. And the journey continues. It takes up like, God, man, I think... takes up like 10 pages or so, right, in the Tao. A look at cadence, which is speed regulated to coincide with the opponent's speed. Tempo, which is that little fragment of time which is most suitable to accomplish effective action. And all of that is before he gets to the stop hit, right? So speed, cadence, tempo, timing, all that stuff before he delves into the stop hit. And then he gives some definitions of it. A timed hit that arrests the opponent in development of his attack. Correct appreciation of time. So like Sifu Nick was saying, correct appreciation of time and distance is essential. And here's an interesting thing. While it's usually made with a straight line technique, it can be part of a disengagement or even done while ducking or slipping, right? So it just goes on and on and on. Sometimes it necessitates the angulation of the body and all that, right? Then there's a little section on counter time, which is also known as a second intention attack, a premeditated movement. And counter time is what you use against somebody who attempts to stop hit you. So there's a huge breakdown, right, of the interception, as opposed to what this guy said. If Bruce Lee had had more time, he would have realized that interception only works when you're fighting against somebody who's slower than you, right? Anyhow, so let's move on, right? Then he continues to talk about, he talks a little bit about the use of the sidekick, right? That it's not exclusive to Jeet Kune, but it's one of Bruce Lee's favorites. And while it's not as popular in MMA, it's an effective weapon. So I'm not sure what he meant by that. The finger jab, it's a foul technique. So I guess, yeah, right? And then here's what he says. Pak Sao Lap Sao, right? I think Bruce Lee already discovered this does not do anything in a real fight. Plus the fact that wrist locks are illegal and extremely hard to pull off. So that means then, right, that this Pak Sao Lap Sao, right, which is we all know is part of trapping. So that means that when people are in the clinch, right, and when people use immobilization, if you look at the pictures that I use for the ad, for the postcard for today's thing, you'll see an example of I forget the name of the fighter, but what he's got essentially is the finishing of a pull-in technique that immobilizes the arm while he hits the guy, in the back of the head. So the idea that immobilization is limited only to Pak Sao and Lap Sao is ridiculous, right? Trapping is used in ground fighting. Trapping is used in the standing, grappling, in the clinch, and whatever, right? But he's not done. He says, however, if there's a weakness in JKD, it is that it has zero training. Dig this. It has zero training against the moves used against them in MMA. While MMA fighters are aware of what Jeet Kune practitioners do, right? So Jeet Kune has zero training against MMA, but MMA practitioners are aware of what Jeet Kune practitioners do. Since the brain, here's what he says, since the brain just categorizes all of them as strikes coming from certain directions. So Jeet Kune has no training against MMA. So I guess then he's not heard of, we here in Miami, we call it the concept of going to Bermuda, right? Because the airline code for Bermuda is BDA. And so, in countering techniques, you can counter before, you can counter during, you can counter after, right? So you take the technique and you work the counter to it, right? So I'm not sure what he's talking about, right? Then he says JKD has close to zero knowledge in wrestling and BJJ. They think they do. This is his quote, right? They think they do, but that is before they get double-legged and are on their backs. Or that they don't know what underhooks are and are just pressed in a corner in a clinch. So he must have really done his research into JKD strategies, right? Because obviously, if he knew anything about Eric Paulson, for example, if he knew anything about Burton Richardson, if he knew anything about Stefan Kesting, he might have a different opinion on this thing that there's close to zero knowledge in JKD about grappling, right? Eric, as you guys know, Eric is the founder of Combat Submission Wrestling. Burton Richardson, who was a couple of weeks ago was on the Jeet Kune Dialogues, he is the head of JKD Unlimited, and Stefan runs an outfit called Grapple Arts. Right, so obviously Bert keeps the name Jeet Kune in what he does, but Eric and Stefan are part of what I call kind of like the undercover or the invisible JKD tribe, right? And then finally the guy says, I guess Jeet Kune was not made for MMA, or it's possibly just a brand name left by Bruce Lee and financially capitalized by the ones associated with it. Whatever, right? So then there was a second response, right? A second guy said, well, no one really knows for sure about Jeet Kune at this point. Yes, a few of Bruce's students are still around, but that leads to point number 2. Jeet Kune was never finished. Jeet Kune was an idea, a way of approaching fighting based around Bruce's experience and his thoughts on fighting. Exactly, Chris, right? But when he died, it really did die with him. There's a little bit more that he says here, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, so we'll just go on to demolish this. So if Jeet Kune died with Bruce Lee, right? What the heck have we been doing in the 45 years since he passed away, right? Because, you know, to me, one of the funniest aspects of this whole Jeet Kune died with Bruce Lee idea is that they never seem to recall that Bruce Lee himself considered himself a pointer to the truth, right? You can find the quote if you look it up, right? A pointer to the truth as opposed to a giver of the truth, right? And there's also a part where he talks about the truth which every student has to discover for himself, right? So if you understand what's going on there, and that is something that has been passed on. I mean, I've trained, you guys know primarily my Jeet Kune source is Dan Inosanto, but I've trained with a lot of the other first generation students who train with Bruce Lee also. So it seems that people who think that Jeet Kune died with Bruce Lee, they don't get the idea that Bruce Lee was simultaneously teaching his students how to fish for themselves, right? And so you're teaching, but you're teaching students how to learn, and in learning, what's one of the best ways? We were talking about this in my class last night. One of the best ways to learn something is to try to teach it or share it with other people, is it not? Right? So if you trained with Bruce Lee in the old days, personally, you were simultaneously being taught how to find answers for yourself. That can in turn turn you into a teacher yourself. But just so you don't think I'm talking out of my you know what, right? Letters of the Dragon. There's a letter on page 36 to Taki Kimura, and it's about the process in learning Kung Fu, and it's about self-cultivation. And it's a whole philosophical breakdown, right, on JKD. On page 43 is another letter to Taki Kimura, and it's actually telling him some stuff about how to run the school and how to deal with competition, right, from certain individuals. And then on page 57, you guys can look this up for yourselves. On page 57, there's a letter to James Lee in Oakland, and it's actually a technical, let me see if I can, I still don't know how the video part works, right? But it's actually a technical thing, and they're talking about counters to techniques and what have you, right? So, and we know that that Bruce Lee and Dan Inosanto worked together on the curriculum for the Chinatown School, for example, right? So if you look at people who, and I mean, I'm one of these people. If you look at people who've been trained by Dan Inosanto, you know, the ones who were there when Bruce Lee was alive, right, and then the ones who came along in the late 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and so on, none of us were actually pulled aside and taught how to teach, right? Because it goes back to that idea that you learn by the doing, and then in the doing, you learn how to convey because you have the personal experience of it all, right? So so that's part of the problem. These guys answered the question from like a purely physical or technical view of Jeet Kune without realizing that in addition to the techniques, there's a strategic and a tactical approach to JKD, as well as a albeit scientific and philosophical approach. And so you got a lot of people out there giving their opinions still after all this time. You got a lot of people out there giving their opinions on Jeet Kune when they don't know that much, if anything at all, right? And then finally, I suggested to them that they check out Jesse James Kosakowski, right? Jesse, I hope I didn't mess up your name. If they'd like to see JKD in action in MMA, right? Just look up Ron and Jesse James Kosakowski, right? Okay, so that's it for today. As usual, feel free to share it, like it, comment, ask me questions if you want. I'll go through the comments after I've posted the video and reply to anything. I've been told to, geez, Ray Wells, my man. There we go. Okay. All right. Sign up for notifications so that you're aware when we go live on Facebook with the broadcasts and the dialogues. Quick skill series available at ilovejeetkundo.com. Tonight, because of the time difference, I'll be off camera dialoguing with Mark Stewart, and then I'll post that because this was postponed from a few weeks ago. So I'll post that on the Jeet Kune Do dialogues, and then on Friday in the Jeet Kune Do dialogues, we'll be talking with Sifu Harinder Singh Sabharwal. And that's this Friday at 3 o'clock. And there's a new YouTube channel, the I Love Jeet Kune Do broadcast. Probably by Friday, the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues channel will be up on the YouTube also. So you guys don't have to stay on Facebook for that. You can just cross over there. And then probably by this time next week, I'll have the audio stuff uploaded to iTunes and SoundCloud. Right, so I mean, I know it's been a while, but we're getting there. We're getting the audio and the video stuff out to you guys. All right, so that's it. Okay, I'll see you back here next week, same time. You guys enjoy the rest of your day. Talk to you soon.